You're listening to the Podcast Detroit Network. Visit www.podcastdetroit.com for more information.
1935, the Lions win the NFL championship. The Detroit Tigers take the World Series. The Red Wings bring home Lord Stanley's Cup. Joe Louis begins his rise to world domination. This transforms the Motor City into Detroit, City of Champions.
And episode 2, Detroit City of Champions. This time it's the trials and tribulations. The difficulty of bringing back a forgotten story. So, Charles Avison, thank you.
Episode 2, man.
Yeah.
Make this happen.
Yeah, I'm Jamie Flanagan here with Charles, and just talking about episode 1. We got a little bit of the backstory. We got a little bit of your backstory, and how you found this interesting statistic in a media guide, and then from there you were like, I'm going to write a paper about this, and you couldn't find the information for the paper, and began a 7-year journey of 3 books and a screenplay and a whole lot more. So we looked at the years surrounding 1935, kind of a little bit of the backstory. Detroit was kind of meh.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Before that, it was in the middle of the Great Depression.
Yeah.
The city is basically, I mean, the auto industry was in the tank, it was in the toilet, and there's cities looking for anything to get excited, and this certainly did the trick. It was akin to a miracle. You've got championships across the board.
33 different
33
championships in 1935 in Detroit, which made us the City of Champions, and really began. I'd be so bold as to say it really launched, fandom and
100%.
and modern
you're not even
sports.
That you nailed it right on the head. This is the birth of Detroit sports. That's the easiest way to say it.
Yeah.
I mean, this is what began Detroit's love affair with especially the identity as a sports town, and not just a Tiger town, not just a home of Garwood, the speedboat racer, but an actual overall sports, and not just a sports town, but a legitimate threat in the world of sports. I mean, like, if you're not looking, Detroit's going to sweep the table of you. They're going to dominate an entire single year. They're going to do something magical, and this was the beginning of that notion, and to bring these fans such joy in the midst of the Great Depression.
Yeah.
These people became, I even have quotes in the books about how after the year was over, even these writers would say, before this season, sports were like, they literally, he said that the sport, basically we were the home of the Tigers and Garwood. That was it.
Yeah.
He said, after this season, we are all diehard sports fans. All anybody wants to talk about is whether the Tigers can repeat, whether the Lions can do this again. And so it literally made Detroit a sports-minded nation, sports-minded city. This is what began it. And so, yeah.
So is the difficulty of bringing back the forgotten story, because we led into it and said that the Tigers were kind of, the catalyst for this. Sure. Garwood there was some positivity about him because he was amazing. Yeah. And we'll do an episode 2 on Garwood.
Oh, absolutely. That's going to be a fun one. That's going to be fun. I'm telling you, it's my favorite stories. Garwood is so great. Yeah.
And then, but then, the excitement from that, then the Tigers had a big turnaround. They invested a ton of money, right? Mm-hmm. The owner, we talked a little bit about that. Yeah. $100,000 at the time, easily $2 million today.
And it was huge because
in the middle of the Depression.
Yeah, and it was huge because the owner of the Tigers, to set that story back up, we talked about in the last episode, but it's just such an incredibly important and interesting element to the story that the owner of the Tigers had in 1933, they had the worst attendance since 1907. The team was on financially, the team was on life support. The owner's entire, his income was wrapped up in the team. And so, his downfall meant the team's downfall. So, the Tigers were in real trouble. And everybody was advising him. And the other thing too is his health was poor, and it was so poor that at the end of after the 1935 World Series, he died just a few weeks after the World Series was over. That's one of the great tragedy, that he'd live, because what he did, he put all of his money into getting Mickey Cochran just so that he could, instead of selling the team, he went all in. Just like a poker player, like, I'm not selling, I'm going all in for one last throw of the dice. He got the World Series, in like one of these great tragedy, type of things. He wins his championship and then, his life ends. I mean, he got the ultimate fulfillment. He'd never won a World Series. It was his fifth attempt at a World Series, and they won it, and then he died. What kind of story is that? I mean, my God. So that's where, So that we were talking about it last week, and I guess again this week.
Yeah. So you said, but what was the importance of this season? You were talking the 1935 season. So So what's the importance of the season?
Well, this is what again, we kind of just hit on it. This is the beginning of this notion. This is Detroit has three really major identities.
Mm-hmm.
We're the Motor City. We are the Motown, the Music City,
mm-hmm.
and we're sports. We're a diehard sports. Those are three major identities.
Yeah.
And so where did the idea of Motown begin? Motown, music, with Motown. What about the Motor City? Where did that begin?
Yeah.
Henry Ford. That's an easy question. Well, where did Detroit sports begin?
1935.
That's what I'm saying. So this is a component.
Yeah.
This is a component. We've just kind of said, we just kind of have taken it for granted, saying, oh, we've just always been a great sports town.
Yeah.
It's just like one of those things. So that's what I'm saying. The importance of it is this is akin to being an American and really not ever heard of the Revolutionary War.
Right.
This is imagine if the situation was reversed and everybody knew about this whole thing, but nobody had ever heard of Henry Ford. Imagine if nobody had ever heard of Henry Ford.
Yeah.
And somebody, instead of this, I was saying, you know why we're the Motor City, Jamie? It's because there's this guy named Henry Ford, and he started the production line, and he created this whole industry. That's how critically important this story was, and how the fact that it was lost. That's why it's so important to bring it back. It's
How did it get lost? How did we lose this? How do we lose this story?
Well, see, that's what I really sought out to try to understand was. I could understand why there would be a lack of books or whatever. I could maybe maybe understand why that would be the case. But but a lot of stories that that there's no books for, there's people still remember it just because it's just an iconic part of history. It's part of the story. So there may be a lack of books or just a handful of books out there. But but people still just kind of remember it just because it's in there, because it's just the story has been told kind of orally, person to person, generation to generation. And so people are like, oh, there's maybe no books on it, but we all remember it, But in this case, there's nothing. It's I have this where that sign right there says, "Did you know?" I have this when I do art shows and that. I have that sign up there, and it's 95% people. Wow, I had no idea that the three teams won their first championships in the same season. It's unknown.
That's why,
So I'm saying, that's the question: is how has it been so completely forgotten? It's not just why isn't there no books on this? It's unknown.
Yeah,
and so that was what I sought to answer. And so. I think that there's a few different. I've come up with a few different things that I think make sense for the reason why. Is that in the 1930s there was and today there's two newspapers: the Detroit Free Press, Detroit News. In the 1930s there was three. You had the Detroit News, the Detroit Free Press, and the Detroit Times. Of those three, the Detroit Times was in the middle of the Great Depression, anyways. The Free Press and News were more about cutting staff and reporting on stories. They were trying to keep their budget low. Whereas the third newspaper, Detroit Times, was owned by William Randolph Hearst, who was a billionaire in his day, one of the richest people in America in his day. So the other two newspapers hated Hearst. And there was a rivalry between these newspapers, especially with the Times. They all hated Times because Hearst could actually, whereas these other newspapers had to just basically cover the story. Yeah. Hearst had the money to actually go and actually create stories, had the money to actually create different sporting events and Detroit Times sponsored events. And then his newspaper would be the only newspaper that covered the event. And then it looked like he had the exclusive, the only exclusive story in town. And so they hated him for all those things. And especially for a stunt that the Detroit Times pulled. And the story I'm about to tell kind of illustrates, just the kind of the situation at the time. Is it was in 1926 in the Detroit newspaper, 26 or 28, somewhere in there. Anyways, they, one of those 2 years, the Detroit News, building, the cash counter was held up at gunpoint.
Yeah.
Okay. Somebody stole $50 from the cash counter in the Detroit News building. And the Detroit Times reported the story. They sent out an extra edition. Detroit News building gets robbed at gunpoint. And so they beat the news to their own robbery story. You know what I mean? It's like stuff like that they did that just annoyed the hell out of these other newspapers. So anyways, the long and short of it, so the idea is that eventually the Detroit Times folded. In 1960, the newspaper folded. So the archives of that so the archives were tucked away. There's only two complete examples. There's only two complete files of the entire archives of the Detroit News. And those are in the Library of Michigan in Lansing and in the Detroit Public Library. So there's only two copies left. And so a lot of times modern.
Is this like microfiche?
Yeah, microfilm. The microfilm. Yeah. So in the 1930s, especially with the City of Champions story, when you're looking at the free press, you're looking at the news. It's like the news in the free press were, again, they were covering the events. Right? They were Tigers win the World Series, Lions do that. Lions win their championship, Red Wings Stanley Cup. But the Times blew it way up.
Yeah.
They blew it way up. It was like every day it was like City of Champions, City of Champions, City of Champions. They had all kinds of fun with it. In fact, it was the Detroit Times which sponsored the Champions Day party at the Masonic Temple at the end of the season. And so the Detroit News and Detroit Free Press didn't even mention that the party was even happening.
Yeah.
The Detroit News mentioned it a day after it happened, but it was after the event happened. And only just like a little blurb. Yeah. That was it. And the Free Press didn't mention it all. The Free Press issued this commemorative newspaper the day after. This is a replica.
Right.
But they issued this commemorative newspaper the day after the party. And that was their sort of, this was April 19th that this newspaper came out. And then April 18th was the day of the party. So it was the day after.
Yeah.
And so because if they were the ones that promoted this, promoted the event, the Detroit Times event, then they would have been given glory to the Detroit Times. See, so that's what I'm saying. So there was a rivalry in that newspaper. So that component is important to understand, because any modern day researcher that goes back in time to look up, that says, oh, I'm going to look up information on these teams, and they only use the news and the free presses, which is maybe all they've ever heard of.
Sure.
Or maybe they think because the Times folded, it wasn't that big of a deal. That they're missing out on an essential trove of information.
And that's where some of your colorful writers
Detroit
came
Times
from.
was an essential component.
Well, it was a kid, Iffy the Dipster. What was it?
Oh, Iffy the Dopester. I think he was the Detroit News. I think he was Detroit News.
I love that name.
Iffy was awesome. He's got a great little cartoon all the time with him too back then. Yeah, he was cool. But so that's a basic component. That's like one element of it. But yeah, and so that's one of it. And then another component of it is the way that people study sports history today. Right. Sports history really isn't that old. I mean, 100 years is really what we go. A little bit over 100 years is the history of American sports. And so a lot of times when a researcher, when they study sports history, they're like the history of the Tigers, the history of the Lions, the history of the Red Wings. It's always compartmentalized into different sports. And so if all you're looking for is the Tigers information or the Lions or whatever, you're not even really looking. There's 8 million things going on in the newspaper. So if all you're looking for is that subject, that's because that's what the readers want to hear. I don't care about football. I don't care about hockey.
Yeah.
I want to just, I just want to read a book about baseball. Leave me alone. I want to do that. And so that's what they write for. That's what the person might be only a baseball historian or only a football historian. So that the way that the sports history is studied is also one of the contributing factors to that component. Because this is all sports. This is the whole. You have to look at the year. And
so, out of these papers, did you read like every day for all three papers? Did you go through each and every? Have you gone through all of them?
Yeah, I did a bracket. But what I did, it was years. It was every single day. I went in there and I read. I didn't read every newspaper, but I did a real thorough, dive through each of them. And what I did was I bracketed. I bracketed like a year and a half on top of each season. So it was like beginning, really I really started before 1934. So it was really late 1933 and then late 1936 was really about the bracket of time that I spent for all three newspapers. And then, it was every day in the Detroit Library. Like I live in Detroit. I live right next to the Detroit Library. So it was every day. I mean, that was my thing, doing studying every day. But, But yeah, so it was, that was key. So, but there's also one other element which I think is really important to the enders, to the element of the forgotten nature of the story, which is that you have to keep in mind like when this story takes place. The story ends in 1936, in April 1936 with Champions Day, and then just a couple of short years later, World War II begins. Sports become completely unimportant, and so when the world comes back from war. When the world comes back from war, within the first couple months of Detroiters coming back from World War II, the Tigers win the World Series. They won the 1945 World Series.
Right.
And then there's the 1950s, the golden age. The auto industry comes back. Yeah. The Lions win 2 championships. The Red Wings win 3. This is like, there's championships galore. Bobby Lane, Gordie Howe, winning championships everywhere. So there was a whole new era of Detroit sports, a whole new era. And so everybody was looking forward to like turning the page. And whenever anybody whenever people look back at like the 1930s, the first thing is like, that was the Depression. Like, what do we need to know about it? That was a depressing time.
Yeah.
And
it was called the Depression.
It was called the Depression.
Why do we want to go there?
Yeah. Great Depression stories are a lot of times marginalized because it's like, that was a depressing time.
Well, fuddly
foo. Yeah. So, but the idea too, just to like with final element to that story, to component is that imagine two brothers going to imagine a father wants to tell his son about going to the Red Wings championship in 1935, just like takes us into a game. But imagine he wants to tell him about this whole events of this year. But the only problem is that he went to these games with his brother, or whatever. Maybe his brother never came home from war. Maybe his brother is no longer there, and that memory is tinged with a sadness. That the fact that they can't, he'll shed a tear just from telling the story. So a lot of these Great Depression stories, people always think of this like almost like an unbroken line, like father to son, mother to daughter, whatever. But a lot of these stories, maybe they were difficult to tell. Maybe they were difficult, they were difficult to pass down.
The trail is broken.
Exactly. So I think that a combination of these events and maybe even more.
Well, then you have the advent of film and the footage, video footage, film footage of the games being more prevalent.
Absolutely.
In the 50s and then into the
when the world came back from World War II, it was a goal. It was everything changed. Everything changed. Yeah. Big broadcasting came in. Everything. And then even when talking about sports history, a lot of times sports history is divided. They actually call it pre-war and post-war. Like they say pre-war sports and post-war sports, meaning World War II. Like the World War II is the great dividing line. And it's like everything that happened before that a lot of times is viewed as like ancient history. I mean, they wore leather helmets in football back then. It's viewed as almost like archaic. And then everything post, it's like, okay, now this is legit sports. This is the real thing. And it really is it's just a perception. It's not anything anywhere near reality. I mean, this is an incredible era. And so I think the combination of those factors, and maybe even more that I haven't even thought of, but that's the elements of the forgotten element of it.
So the current forgotten elements, right? That was what we were talking about there. So what needs to be remembered? What do we have to dive in, and what do we have to extract from this?
Yeah, well, I mean the whole component of that's that's what I'm saying. Like we talk about like, oh, this story was important, and like we got to remember this story, or at least I tell people like this is important to remember. But it's more than just like saying, than just saying, oh, well, hey, we just heard Charles and Jamie showed it. I remember. It's all good and done. It's all well, and now I remember. It's fine. We can move on. But what I refer to like sort of a thing that I said earlier on, which was that forgetting this is akin to forgetting like Henry Ford. Forgetting like the American Revolution and being called an American, because it's what what happened to lead to the evolution of these teams, which is I think the core of what needs to be remembered. And they remember in the main for the Lions. I'll give you an example. For the Lions, the important element of the story is the fact that they arrived in Detroit in 1934 as a result of the Tigers. Electrifying the city. The city was going crazy for baseball, and the NFL had this great team in Portsmouth, Ohio, and they're like, well, maybe we can utilize the enthusiasm of the Detroit Tigers, to establish a football team where we failed 3 times to do so before. You see, so that's the connection with the Tigers. Like, that the Lions were brought there because of this excitement in the Tigers. They were named the Lions because of the Tigers. Their best player, Dutch Clark, was nicknamed the Ty Cobb of football so that there was an association as in like a new Ty Cobb in Detroit. So, I mean, like I say, the rise of the Tigers in 34 and 35 was essential for the birth of the Lions. And then it was, as far as the Tigers concerned, besides the many incredible stories and players that need to be remembered as, within the boundaries of the Tigers story, is the idea that the Tigers were even in the position to do that.
Yeah.
That there was such this huge love. The fans were so crazy for the Tigers at that moment that it actually led to the birth of an NFL team. You see what I'm saying? Like, to understand, that I think it just shows. So really to understand just how important the 1934 and 35 Tigers were to this, to Detroit. And a lot of times they're kind of like, it was battle back and they did win a championship that year. That's cool. But no, they were essential. They were a critical component of the story of Detroit sports. And they've largely, there's, like I say, Hank Greenberg, Charlie Gehringer, a couple names that people remember, but by and large, the story of what this season, what happened in 1935 is, especially with the Tigers, is forgotten. And as far as the Red Wings are concerned, the Red Wings perhaps benefited more from any other team as a result of this season. Like I say, going into I said in the last episode, going into 1935, the Red Wings were not even the fans that came to watch the Red Wings before that were Windsor fans who would be cheering on Canadian teams.
Yeah.
They weren't even like hockey was not popular in Detroit. The fans were the Jack Adams, the GM was mocked for supposedly trading potatoes for tickets just to get fans in the stadium, the arena. And the Red Wings had changed their name 3 times in 5 years.
Right.
This is a team that really, like I say, they were like a third class, if that, in the city. And then suddenly, now after Joe Louis has risen to the top of the charts, which is also a fundamentally important thing to remember, is the story of Joe Louis in 1935. But you have the Tigers win their first World Series. You have the Lions win their first NFL championship. And so with all this winning going on, now all eyes for the first time in their history are on the Red Wings. Yeah. Fans of Detroit are looking over at this obscure Canadian sport, and they're saying, what? You mean we can win like all 3 championships? Like we can have like a city of, they started hyping up the city of champions. Well, Detroit could become the city of champions if we win this hockey, this obscure, what's the name of the trophy? A Stanley Cup? They didn't even know what the name of it was. It's so that's what I'm saying. Like all of a sudden they didn't necessarily, it was like that's when Detroit fell in love with hockey, because like now the Red Wings, they're not just like playing to win something. They're playing for Detroit. They're playing for that final piece of the puzzle.
Right.
And so it was an intrigue. And so they're selling out games like every night is another record, setting attendance records every single game. And then using that, that backed by that fan enthusiasm, backed by like the greater gravity to what they were doing, the Red Wings win their championship, and again, they create this notion of Detroit supremacy in sports, and establish Detroit sports story. So, and
you pulled all this stuff out of, let's go back to your research that you did in these primary resources of these newspapers and the people talking and telling their stories through the newspaper articles. So you mentioned, like, a lot of times people write a book and it'll be a baseball book. You write a football book, you write a hockey book. The City of Champions, now this covers all 3 plus all the other 33 championships.
Yeah, 33 championships.
It's a trilogy of books now. So would a baseball fan enjoy this, and would a football fan enjoy these pieces? I
think so. I mean, I love all sports. I loved all the sports, but I just think it's not, the whole thing is, I think it's about the story. I just think that's what's so cool. And and they all were interrelated. Like the Tigers would show up at Lions games. Joe Louis was known for going to all the different sports games. So you see all these different characters pop up in each other's stories, and they all are interrelated. And that's kind of goes back to what I was saying about, it really, I guess you could say, the final element to why this story, what needs to be reconsidered, what needs to be remembered, is the idea that, even if you're only a Tiger fan, even if you're only a Lions fan, even if you're only a Red Wings fan, okay?
Yeah.
In order to understand your team's early history of where it came from and how it became the way that it is, you at least have to know what happened in the beginning, because there was that interrelationship. They all benefited from being part of this story. And again, the Red Wings story, you cannot separate from the City of Champions season. You can't say, oh, I love the Red Wings, I study their history, I read Red Wings history books. but I don't really care about the Lions and Tigers. I don't even know about the City of Champions season. I don't really care. You know what I mean? Like that's what I'm saying. It's inseparable from that story. That's what led to the enthusiasm in Detroit. And so what I was trying to, lead into it with all this is the idea that, is it enough to lean back on the self-satisfaction of knowing, I know I can stump a random person at a bar trivia question because I know the answer to the City of Champions question.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Is it a novelty, or is it something that's worth holding modern day teams, reporters, writers, accountable for the stuff that comes after this discovery, and saying, like, if they only write a book about the Red Wings, or if they don't talk about Champions Day, or if they don't talk about the City of Champions season, or any of the components that made that team, become what it became, as the benefits of this season haven't happened. Like, is it worth us holding these people that are responsible for that information accountable to what we now know?
Yeah.
Right? Like, I'm not blaming people for saying, oh, you don't remember the City of Champions season. It's, you're an idiot or something. I'm just saying, but now we do.
Yeah.
It's not our fault that we didn't know about it. But now, who are we if we're confronted with the fact of what we now know, and you still don't do anything about it?
Yeah.
Are we really a great sports town if discovering the fact that the greatest season ever happened in our own backyard, that we fail to even try to do anything?
I love these.
And that's where I come in.
They're like the Harry Potter series. The first one, the City of Champions, the overall book is a little thin. Yeah, and by the time you get to the third one, it's like the Half-Blood Prince. And it's
really, I wrote the second two are all about the players. And so I wrote these two together. So this is what it would have looked like if I hadn't separated them.
Yeah, that's a monster.
Yeah, it's a monster. So I wouldn't want to release an encyclopedia. But anyways, the difficulty of the books was that because they're so thick. A lot of people were telling me when I was going to publish them that I should divide them into Tigers, Lions, Red Wings. Joe Louis, Tigers, Lions, Red Wings, and then the 33 championships. Like, I should have 5 different thin books.
Yeah.
And then I could sell them, piecemeal and make more money. Yeah. But that ties right back into what I just said about once they're separated. Now people are like, oh, I only want to buy the Tigers. I only want to buy the Red Wings, the Lions, whatever. Yeah. I'm contributing to this exact same situation. That was the dilemma that I found myself in when publishing it. So I had to divide them in half. The first book focuses on is like the introduction, and then Joe Louis and the Tigers, and then the third book is the Lions, Red Wings, and all the other champions of 1935.
Walter Hagen. We're gonna get to Walter.
Dude, there's some great stories in there.
He was a bit of a character.
Oh, a bit, yeah. He was, man. Walter. That's another story. I'm really looking forward to talking about.
So
the Hague.
There he is. We were chatting about what we're going to cover on the podcast, and back and forth, and what to call the first one. And episode 1 was the discovery. Yeah. This episode 2 is just trials and tribulations and the difficulty of bringing back the forgotten story.
Yeah.
And then you got to map out the next story. Episode 3 is going to be the Genesis, and that's the arrival of Mickey Cochran, and we're going to go into that in the third episode. But and again, that's the thing about 1935. It is so deep. There are so many people, and each of these players and coaches and owners.
We've got a lot of shows to do.
Are there own stories
to do, man?
There's a lot of stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
So follow us along. We're going to cover it all. We're going to dive deep into all of it. And next up is the arrival of Mickey Cochran. We're going to go there next.
I keep saying I'm looking forward to a story. Like, I'm looking forward to Garwood. I'm looking forward to Walter Hagen. I'm looking forward to Mickey Cochran. I'm looking for man, wait till we get to Sid Howe. Wait till we get to Sid Howe. And he's not related to Gordy. The Ottawa assassin, Sid Howe. Wait till we get to him. I can't wait to get to him too.
All right, so everybody just stop what you're doing, pull over, and then subscribe, because you got to hear the Ottawa assassin,
Sid Howe.
All right, we're getting to that one. I don't know where he falls in the.
It's not for a while. We got a lot of other stories to get to.
But there is.
There's so many. Yeah.
Geez. All right. Yeah. It looks like we had 2 or 3 mapped out for Joe Louis here. 4. And then, there's so many.
There's so many. We're going to get to, but there's a lot of great stories. I'm telling you, but maybe that was like a teaser to drag people along, to hook people on. Go, wait till we get to the Ottawa assassin.
Ottawa assassin.
And then, every episode they tune in to hear the Ottawa assassin, and it's like, damn, when are we going to get to him? So we're going to drag him along. We're going to drag him along but we'll get to him. There's a lot. I mean, there's so many. I mean, it's such a, it's, I'm really looking forward to the whole series.
Yeah. Man. And I plug your books, but it's how I found out about you, and it's how I found out about this season. And if people want to get their hands on the book, you're not doing a commercial for it, because really the point of the podcast was just you and I to sit down. And I wanted you to tell me the stories. I love how excited you get about these stories, and I'm like, holy crap, people need to hear this. Yeah. But your books are available on the website, DetroitCityOfChampions.com. Yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. And that's the main thing. There's a Facebook page for it as well. Yep. We'll be doing videos of these podcasts. We're going to intersperse some of the photos into the video, so you're not just staring at our mugs the whole time. But we'll throw some of the pictures in there for the video of it as well. And you got to so these photos and things are they there? Because you said that we've done some stuff. We've been working with Joe Louis Bourbon, and you had pulled out like this photo of Joe, because we were doing an episode about Lucky Millender, the big band director at the time. Yeah. And apparently he and Joe had become friends and whatever. And then you have this picture of Joe Louis conducting a band. Yeah, that's great. And it's got to be Lucky's band.
Who knows? Yeah, it must have been. Yeah.
Most likely. But you've come across some like really unique and interesting photos. What's one piece of photographic that's just like a feather in your cap, something you were really proud of, you never imagined you would find, something you found photographically that just blew you away?
Man, it would be very tough to.
Yeah,
it would be
because these books are illustrated like crazy. And again, we're going to intersperse them into the
there's over
videos
1,000
here as well.
Photos. It's tough. You're looking at Bucko McDonald right there. He's my favorite. He's my favorite Red Wing of all time.
Oh yeah.
Oh, wait till we get to Bucko, man.
Bucko the Sacco
McDonald. He's my favorite. I wrote for the screenplay for the movie. He's my I wrote the character for Bucko into it. Bucko, he was one of the most fascinating personalities in sports history, man. They used to say he was green. Either like he might, the word green indicates like a fresh young player, a young guy. They're like, some of the writers said he may be green, but he's as green as green hickory, because he was like a tough, smash mouth type player.
Oh my God!
But as far as photos, I think I don't know. It's so tough.
Was there anything that just blew you away?
So there's two things. I don't want to talk about any specific photo or anything like this.
Okay.
But, and actually, that's an episode we can add. Is this newspaper I found? There's a whole story. I'll tell this real quick story about this newspaper. How's that sound? This is just to get the story. I can dive deeper into a full episode later if we want. But the concept is this. Is that from the very beginning of this project, I feel like there's been something that's wanted this to come back, right? I feel like there's some kind of divine guidance of some capacity, God or something like this. And so anyways, when I was finished with the first book, what I found out when I was doing this first book was that at the City of Champions dinner, the Detroit Times had issued a commemorative newspaper just for that dinner. Okay.
Oh.
So it wasn't released to the public. It was only released for that, to commemorate this dinner. And there was an estimated 800 fans there in that game. So I estimated maybe 1,000 of these newspapers were printed. And you can clearly see them holding. I have the photos in the first book where they're reading this newspaper. You can just see the shapes in the newspaper and everything. And so I was like, oh my God, I got to get this newspaper. I want to see it. I want to see this newspaper. And so, I couldn't find it for the first book. There was no looking for it. Where do you look for something like that? You know? And so, I wrote a note to myself and I taped it to my desk for the 7 years I was working on these second two books. And the note said right there, look for the City of the Champions Day newspaper. Okay.
And who, the Times did it?
The Detroit Times, because they threw the Times through the party, and Bud Shaver was sports editor for the Times, and he was the MC of the event. And so Joe Louis was the guest of honor. All the teams were there. Everything was huge. I mean, all the teams were there and everything. And so anyways, I had this note taped to my desk that said, look for for Champions Day newspaper. It was taped to my desk so that every day when I worked on this, I would look on eBay, on newspaper, there's sites where you can buy old newspapers. There's all these different, there's a bunch of different places you can look.
Yeah.
So every single day for almost 7 years, I checked every single website out there, anywhere I could look for this newspaper. Okay. And it was nothing. I mean, it was maybe it was 5 years so anyways, but every day I was looking for this newspaper.
Yeah.
Okay. And then and so this is where it kind of gets kind of weird or interesting or something. But I was at a bar this one night in Detroit. I was at 3rd Street Bar, and I met these two people at this bar. And we had a great time. We were having a great conversation. We were talking about all kind of cosmic stuff, right? Something like this. And the conversation warranted going back to my apartment to have to drink more and talk more and do whatever. Anyways, it was that night that, I like to listen to other people's perspectives. I like to, put myself in their shoes and their thoughts and everything. And the thoughts that they were telling me were kind of dark, okay? They were talking about like that there's no God. And that like we're just random, we're just random things, and we're like, how can we think we're, there's a God? Anyways, the line of thought that they presented to me, like actually was like, it actually was somewhat of a convincing line of thought. I believe in God and everything, and that was, and considering their line of thought was really like a dark thing for me, at least for me. Maybe people take comfort in it or whatever, but I didn't, and it was like, anyways. So that night, I was like, I went to bed or whatever. They left, and then the next morning, I wake up, and it was with that same thought in mind that it was like this dark, like that. Man, maybe there's no God out there, man. This is a weird thing, and it was just kind of like almost like a hopeless thought, right? And so, anyways, I checked my email. The very first line at the top of the page, the very first message of my morning when I woke up, it said City of Champions newspaper. First email that next morning with that line of thought in my head. And I clicked on it, and it says, it was a guy named Joseph Doobie. And he says, Mr. Avison, I was cleaning out my attic, and I found an old trunk in my attic that has a newspaper that says City of Champions. It was by the Detroit Times that this newspaper was put out. And I was like, and he said, do you have any information on this?
Oh, so he was looking to you because you're a source on this.
Well, he looked up Detroit City of Champions, and the .com came up, my website.
Yeah.
And so then he invited me out to his place. I go out to his place. He told me it was the 18th.
Oh,
there
my
was
God.
No price on the newspaper.
Yeah.
You know what I mean, this is it. This is the City of this is the Champions Day newspaper.
Yeah. God's a paper boy, apparently.
So I go out. I drove out to his house. It was a couple hours away, and I had everything that I could offer him to buy this newspaper, which was not much.
I'm going to give you my car.
It doesn't pay well to be like a research historian working on a project that nobody's ever heard of. And so I go up there with I think I had like $210. That was everything I had.
Yeah.
And I had, I had a copy of my first book. I had, just a bunch of other trinkets I could muster. And I go up there. And sure enough, he lays this in front of me. And not only is it that champion, I mean, I recognize the hell out of it because I got the photos in my book.
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm like, this is it. And here's the thing. I told him, I have been looking for this for 6 years. I'm like, this is the only copy of this probably in existence.
Yeah.
And he had told me that. This is the only copy in existence. So I told him up front, I go, this is a priceless newspaper. It's priceless. And I told him, I go, but here's the thing. Nobody knows what it is. To me, it's priceless.
Yeah.
And probably to the world once they find out what it is too.
Yeah.
But right now, nobody has any idea what this is.
It's an amazing piece of memorabilia.
Yeah, exactly. And the other, I forgot one of the coolest parts about the newspaper. It was signed by the 3 Tigers' best pitchers in 1935 at the top of the newspaper in pencil. Schoolboy Rowe, Eldon Walker, and Tommy Bridges had all signed it. So it was probably signed by them on Champions Day.
Oh my God.
Right? It was in mint condition, this newspaper. Almost mint condition.
Oh my God.
And I wasn't trying to rip him off or anything. I laid it all on the table exactly what it was.
Sure, yeah.
This is a priceless newspaper. But I told him, I said, here's the thing. In my hands, this one copy of the newspaper that your grandfather or your dad held on to from that party will help to tell this story. Everyone will get to see it in my hands. And that's the reason I want it. I'm not getting it for the value of it. I'm getting it because I can take this newspaper and put it in my books, clean it up a little bit so people can see it. And, maybe one day we can have it in like a museum so everybody can see the original. But my point is that it's almost, and it fascinates me, it fascinates me that somebody that, that there 100,000 newspapers were issued on that day.
Yeah.
And that this one newspaper that, somebody was holding in their hand that day could one day, 80 years later, be seen by thousands, millions, whatever you want to say.
Sure.
That one newspaper that was conveying information on that one day to that one person, 80 years later could convey it to such a potentially much larger audience. I just always thought that was cool. But just the overall story. So I'll finish it.
Yeah.
So I told him, I said, I said, this is, I laid it out. This is what it is. It's incredibly valuable. It is, it is what it is. And I said, and I was like, I was like, can I make you an offer or whatever? I definitely indicated that I was interested in whether it was to borrow or to buy or whatever.
Right.
And so anyways, he gave it to me.
Oh my God.
He gave it to me.
Oh my God.
He goes, take it. It's for you. I was like, are you serious, man? He goes, this is my gift. Like, make it, make sure everybody sees it.
Oh my God.
Make sure everybody sees it. He gave me this newspaper. And so I gave him a copy of my book, this and that. And, and so my point is, I guess the fascinating, and I wrote a whole story about it in the third book. I have a section in the second and third book called Tales of a Traveling Storyteller.
Sure.
Which is all this crazy, weird stuff that happens over the course of 6 years of following this story. And anyways, but I was like, but I'm like, from that morning when I was like, had this dark thought about me, it was at that moment where I was considering whether or not, like, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there is no, divine influence, leading me across leading me towards this project and helping me finish these books.
You got a bigger answer than you ever imagined.
Yeah. Maybe there's no God. Oh, maybe there's no God. And then, but that was definitively erased when I'm like, dude, that the Champions Day newspaper, like at the moment I was having those thoughts. So like, I'm telling you, I'm here to say like, there's a God, man. Or at least some kind of divine influence, because
and she is cool.
She is, I'm trying to, So, anyways, but that's what I'm saying. So I think that's got to be my, my favorite, if not one of my favorite stories. But I've got a million. I mean, there's a lot of
So where's that paper now? Is it you got it framed
up?
I've
got it. I don't. It's not. I don't have it framed
sealed?
At this moment.
Well, because there's a lot to it, right? How big?
It's a whole newspaper. That's what I'm saying. As soon as you put it in a frame, you're kind of leaving only one section open. In the newspaper, that's what I'm saying. It's huge. It's 18 inches tall, 24 inches tall, and 18. It basically looks like this, but 2 panels.
Wow.
That's what you're looking at, like this.
Wow.
And so, I mean, it's huge. And of course, that it's a full newspaper. It's like 6 pages.
You got to put the little white knit gloves on.
Kind of, yeah. The biggest thing with an old newspaper, and this is a tip for anybody that has an old newspaper, is to lay them flat. Don't keep them folded, because the acid of the newspapers gravitates towards the seams.
Oh. Okay.
And so, and what happens is the acid, because it's all acid paper. And so the acid gravitates towards the fold, and then once they both connect, that's where you see that dark brown line that gives, and then it eats away the middle of it. So anybody that's got anybody that has an old newspaper that you're trying to preserve, lay them flat. Lay them flat. That's the key. Yeah. But anyways, I have it laid flat, and I haven't framed it because it's tough. It's like, what side do you frame? Like, you frame the one side where. Because that's what's so cool about the paper, and I have it all. The photos are all in the book.
So it's been preserved, and
I've got it in. I got this whole special section in here. Let me see if I can just really quickly. I'll show real quick. So here it is right here. This is the Champions Day. Can they see it on the page? Maybe we'll insert it in the photos. I'll send you the pictures. Because this is the cover page.
Hail champs.
You can just see this is all the champions from 35.
Okay.
These are they did a quick summary of all the different champions. They showed all the last moments for each game. There's the Tigers are on the top there. Joe Louis looking down at one of his opponents he's knocked out. The final goal for the Red Wings.
Nice.
Goose Goslin hitting the final hit to win the World Series, and Dutch Clark carrying the football in the NFL championship game. So and then I've got the signatures right there too. You can see it on the newspaper. Wow. So that's what I mean. Like, it was just I think that was I think that's one of at least one of my favorite. Certainly one of my favorite stories. Certainly one of my favorite stories. But there was. My God, you saw it. You opened the book and found Bucko McDonald, just a picture of Bucko McDonald. Like, well, hold on a second. Let's talk about Bucko real quick. Yeah. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, what's your favorite picture? That one.
Yeah.
I mean,
today
I love them all.
One,
yeah, tomorrow it'll be different. Like.
All right. So we have a lot of stories to tell. DetroitCityOfChampions.com, Detroit City of Champions. The podcast is on Facebook too. Find us there, DJ Jamie Detroit, on all the socials, and a website there to say hi to me, and if there's something you want to know, or
that'd be cool.
Something you want us
questions
to head towards,
that'd be cool.
Reach
questions
out
or anything, that'd be cool.
Reach out and we will answer them. So like and subscribe, leave a comment. We truly appreciate that wherever fine podcasts are sold. We'll do it again. So we'll dive into to. What did I say? The Mickey Cochran story next time.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
So the advent of the Tigers. Yeah. All right, cool. Detroit City of Champions. We're out.
All right, buddy.